3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to SHOAL's 1000 Fishes Blueprint webinar for those in Eastern time zones. Thank you for joining us today. Before we jump in, just a small bit of housekeeping. We will record the session and we'll make it available to view on the SHOAL website and YouTube channel after the event. We will keep the Q&A function open throughout the webinar. Please take this opportunity to ask the panelists any questions you might have about the 1000 Fishes Blueprint, any of the individual panelists' work, or freshwater species conservation more broadly. We'll try and get through to all the questions, though if we do run out of time, please write to info@shoalconservation.org with your question and we'll get back to you over the coming days. Great. So over the next couple of hours, we'll hear from a selection of experts who have been involved in bringing the blueprint together and who have already been doing some excellent work in addressing the issues outlined in it. When we talk about the blueprint, we're talking about a global conservation framework for freshwater fish conservation launched by SHOAL with the IUCN SSC Freshwater Fish Specialist Group and the IUCN Biodiversity Assessment and Knowledge Team. We released it back in April. The blueprint, to give its full name, is 1000 Fishes, a blueprint for accelerated conservation action for 1000 freshwater fishes by 2035. And you can read the full copy on SHOAL's website at shoalconservation.org. In terms of numbers of species to launch action for in just over a decade, the blueprint represents quite possibly the single most ambitious conservation program ever undertaken. 1000 species in 10 years is a lot, but 1000 is also a number that is achievable and shows the level of ambition that is desperately needed. As I'm sure you already know, freshwater fish are at the very sharp end of the global biodiversity crisis. And as you'll hear about in the presentations, SHOAL represents an innovative and highly collaborative attempt to tackle a global crisis by mobilizing partners both at the strategic level, such as large conservation agencies, zoos, aquaria, museums, and funding organizations, but also, most importantly, local community-level organizations working at the front line to protect vital freshwater habitats. By being hosted by Synchronicity Earth and Rewild and linking closely with IUCN, particularly those involved in red listing, SHOAL is able to move swiftly and act independently, supporting the entire network of partners. Now you can see why the initiative is called SHOAL. The bigger the shoal, the stronger the shoal is. Hopefully, if you are not involved as a partner, you will be soon. So to introduce our speakers. First up is Brian Zimmerman, the co-chair of the IUCN SSC Freshwater Fish Specialist Group, who will discuss more detail of the blueprint and outline some positive case studies from successful freshwater fish conservation projects from around the world. The FFSG have been fundamental to the blueprint's data analysis, and they have helped select the full species list of more than 2,300 fishes and helped identify key analytical parameters. We'll then hear from SHOAL's Executive Director, Mike Baltzer, who will discuss the contents of the blueprint and outline why its ambition is necessary if we are to halt the extinctions and recover the populations of a significant number of freshwater fish species. Last but definitely not least, we'll hear from Rajeev Raghavan, the Assistant Professor at the Kerala University of Fisheries and Ocean Studies. Rajeev will talk with us about some of the excellent work he and his partners are currently doing in India's Western Ghats region to protect and conserve many of the exciting and diverse fishes there. Thanks so much for joining us. And Brian, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. And it's a real pleasure to be with you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everybody who's on the call, whatever the time is in your area. It's a real pleasure to be able to share this presentation with you, which I'm going to attempt to do now, hopefully successfully. Can you see that okay?
Yes, it's in presenter mode. It's kind of split screen, but we can.
All right, I need to change that. That same thing. Let me try it a different way. Is that better?
Yep. That looks good.
Okay. Thanks, second time lucky. Okay, yeah, so hello everybody. My name is Brian Zimmerman. I'm the Director of Conservation and Science at Bristol Zoological Society. And as Michael pointed out, I'm also the co-chair of the IUCN SSC Freshwater Fish Specialist Group. It's a real pleasure to be here to be able to discuss the 1,000 Fishes Blueprint and accelerated conservation action for 1,000 freshwater fish species. As Michael mentioned, I'm going to be talking a little bit more generally about freshwater fish and the unique challenges that they face, and also provide a few case studies. So yeah, freshwater fish facing a number of challenges. Freshwater only covers about 1% of Earth's surface, but yet it hosts a huge amount of biodiversity. 30% of all known vertebrates, so that's across all taxa, and over half of the known fish species are found in just this 1% of habitat on the planet. And yet it's in peril. We've lost 35% of our wetlands in the last 50 years, and that's 3 times the rate of loss of forest, to put some context to that. Yet forests get a lot more attention than freshwaters do. And also since 1970, the last 50 years, there's been an average decline of 84% in freshwater species populations. So that's the biomass found in our freshwaters. 84% has already been lost. And sadly, that means that we know of at least 82 species of freshwater fish that have disappeared since the early 20th century. And that number is actually likely to be much higher because many extinctions in freshwater go unnoticed. These are hugely biodiverse habitats, and as I mentioned just before, over half of the known fish species are described from freshwater ecosystems, 18,688 species, that is, and yet about 17% of them are considered threatened, with an additional nearly 15% listed as data deficient. And many of those data deficient species are also likely to be threatened. We just don't have enough information about them to be able to make an accurate assessment through the red list. So SHOAL's Priority Fishes has identified 2,338 species, according to the red list, that need urgent conservation action. These are species that are either extinct in the wild or in the higher threat categories, critically endangered, or vulnerable, and make up, as I said, about 17% of the species of known freshwater fish on the planet. There are a number of threats, and sometimes multiple threats, that freshwater fish species face. 69% are impacted by habitat degradation, as we ignore the importance of freshwaters and destroy these habitats. Pollution impacts a number of species as well, with 57% impacted by direct pollution events. It's a very, very common occurrence in the news, certainly here in the UK, with our waterways being polluted. Dams and water management, so hydrology schemes, impact 43% of species on the primary fish list, and 34% of those species are impacted by invasive species. So fish that are introduced by humans into places where they don't belong, that then directly impact the species that are actually living there and are native to that area. Fishing and aquatic resource harvesting accounts for 25% of threats to those species, and climate change is impacting 18% of them. And that number is likely to only go up as the Earth warms. This very interesting heat map shows the distribution of the priority fish species that SHOAL has identified, with the colors in the darker pinks and purples representing high numbers of species in those areas. And you can see there are some patterns here where there's high amount of diversity and also a high amount of threat. Southeast Asia is one area, also the Western Ghats in India, which Rajeev is going to talk about, Europe, and particularly the Mediterranean area, Central Africa, and then a whole scattering of locations throughout South America and Mesoamerica in particular. These are all hot spots for fish biodiversity, freshwater fish biodiversity, but also threatened species. When we look more in detail at the 2,338 priority fish species, we can see that 89% of them are range restricted. Because freshwater fish species are found in many times in very small habitats, they are directly impacted when these small habitats are in some way threatened by human activities. And these range restricted species are most at threat of extinction. 13% or 305 species require ex situ conservation. This is where zoos and aquariums can play a role in helping to prevent immediate extinction of species and buy time for them so that they can be hopefully reintroduced back into the wild in the future. And 6% or 139 species are classified as critically endangered or possibly extinct. And that means they may already be lost, but we just don't have enough information to be able to make that assessment yet. Humans like to find out how wildlife fits into them and why it should be important to them. We often have a very human-centric view on the value of animals. And 954 species on the red list are listed as having specific interest to humans. 459 species of interest to the aquarium trade. Many people keep aquariums at home, and so a lot of those species are sold and bought in the aquarium trade. 229 are important for small-scale economy and subsistence fisheries. And then 123 are important for large-scale commercial fisheries. So you can imagine places like the Great Lakes in Africa, as well as big rivers like the Mekong, which have large commercial fisheries. And then smaller numbers of fish are impacted by bycatch or directly through angling, used for bait, or maybe for medicinal purposes. Many freshwater fishes are migratory and they swim upstream to spawn or downstream after they've spawned. And you can see that many of them are impacted by the dams and the barriers that we put in place. So 130 of the priority fish species on SHOAL's list are migratory, and they live in these main rivers, many of whom these rivers will be familiar to you. So the Danube and the Mekong being the top one with 7 priority fishes in each. EDGE, or the evolutionarily distinct and globally endangered list, is created for multiple different taxa, and there's now a freshwater fish list. And you can see here the top 25 shoal priority fishes have the highest EDGE ranks, and they're in these hotspots. Again, places like Madagascar, Australia, and Southeast Asia are hotspots with critically endangered species that are evolutionarily distinct. And that means if we lose them, we also lose those important lineages for which there are fewer numbers of species in them. This map shows where the data deficient and unevaluated species are concentrated. The countries in red show where there's large numbers of species that we just don't have enough information about yet to be able to make a proper assessment. These, uncoincidentally, are areas where there's high amounts of biodiversity. If we look in Brazil with the Amazon River system and all of its tributaries, vast numbers of species, many of which have not yet been described, and many of which we just do not have enough information to be able to make an assessment. In Central Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and in Southeast Asia, and places like Indonesia and Vietnam, as well as India and China, have large numbers of data deficient species that we need to learn more about in order to understand whether they are threatened. This map shows the priority genera list. These are species or genera of fish which contain a number of species that are on the priority list. And again, you can see patterns here: Southeast Asia, Mediterranean Europe, Africa, and South America, with high concentrations of priority genera, with many species in them that are on the priority list. There are a number of habitats that are composed of freshwater that have large numbers of species in them. Lake endemics have 319 priority fish species. If you think of places like Lake Tanganyika, Lake Victoria, and Malawi, there's lots of species that are found there and only there in each of those lakes, and they're threatened by human impact. Springs and oases are often very small habitats, and they're very, very quickly impacted by human activities, whether that's through groundwater abstraction or direct pumping. 176 priority fish species are from these small habitats. In caves and caverns, we're learning more all the time, and we're discovering new species that have been unknown up until now. And these subterranean habitats contain 88 priority fish species. And then in places like Southeast Asia, in Indonesia and Malaysia, the peat swamps that live in the forests, or the habitats that are found in these forests, these very ancient forests that are being felled for the creation of oil palm plantations. When the forests go, the peat swamps go, and the water goes, and unfortunately, so do the fish, which is why 68 species of priority fish are found in these habitats. So the goal is 1,000 of the most threatened freshwater fish species receiving sufficient conservation attention to ensure the species are no longer heading towards extinction, and the potential for recovery exists by 2035. So we've got 11 years to do this action for 1,000 species. This sounds ambitious, and it is. However, it's also pragmatic, and we need to be aware that freshwater habitats and freshwater fishes have largely been neglected for many, many years, and we now need to make up for lost time and for those decades of neglect where they weren't even on the radar of many conservationists. So out of the 2,338 priority fish species, our aim by 2035 is to focus conservation attention and have an action in place for 1,000 of those fish species. At the moment, only 288 species can be considered as having some form of action directly related to them. So we really, really need to increase that amount. I now want to talk about a few case studies of why I think this ambitious plan is possible. I'm going to talk about my favorite subject, which is pup fishes. These are fascinating, interesting fish, of which there are many species. Unfortunately, almost most of them, and nearly all of them, are threatened in some way by human activities. These are fish that are survivors, they're resilient, they're found in often desert habitats and small springs. And this group of 4 fish that I'm going to introduce here are from northern Mexico, or they were from northern Mexico. The 2 on the left are extinct. They were lost in the late 80s because their springs dried up. The 2 on the right were a bit luckier. They are also extinct in the wild, but they've survived thanks to the dedication of a few biologists who collected a few animals from each of their springs and maintained and saved them by keeping them in aquariums. So the fates of these 4 pupfishes are very different, but it really does show that there's an option when we do act quickly to save species from immediate extinction. These photos show the habitats that these fish lived in. Very small springs, easily impacted by human activity. The picture on the top left shows the spring back in the 70s when there was still water flowing. And then within the space of just a few years, a few decades, the spring was completely dried by over-pumping for agriculture. The picture on the top right shows smoke coming out of a spring, which once existed, but the water is no longer there and it's actually caught on fire. And the picture on the bottom right, it says D on it, is a small spring. And this was one of the habitats of these pupfish that existed before the spring dried up. You can see how tiny this habitat was, and it was the entire location for just that species. When we have these species and we take them into captivity, it's really important that we focus on collaborative management. And EAZA, the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, freshwater teleos tag, developed a regional collection plan to prioritize those species most in need of collaborative ex situ management. And this was published in 2020. And the work now is about focusing on how we collaboratively manage these small populations of fish species to prevent them from being lost, so that in the future they can be reintroduced to the wild. A conservation action plan has now been drafted for the extinct in the wild pupfish from Mexico, and it's got 4 goals with the ultimate aim of returning these fish back into the wild in Mexico where they belong. This action plan is the product of work of many different organizations led by the Zoological Society of London, and with its ambitious aim, it's needed to take into lots of different priorities to realize its ultimate goal. The second example I have is from a place I dearly love, which is Greece, and it concerns these 2 species of fish, of which there are only 3 members in the entire family, the Valenciidae. The fish on the left is Valencia roberta, and the fish on the right is Valencia letornixi, both critically endangered, only found in the southern tip of Albania, western Greece, a few Ionian islands, and now extinct in the northern Peloponnese. These fish have been impacted again massively by human activity. And the Hellenic Center for Marine Research is one of the partners that I'm working with to try and save these species from extinction. We've done a variety of different innovative strategies to try and save the fish. We've beamed live streams of scientists in the field working on conservation of these fish into classrooms in Greece and in the UK to teach the next generation of conservationists what they need to do to be able to save species from extinction. We've conducted translocation work of small populations, small numbers of fish were moved from one location where they were imperiled into new safe locations where the watershed was more protected. And this has yielded results after many years of planning and carefully moving fish from one place to the next. We now know that we've established safety net populations in the wild in secure locations. It's really important that we embrace new technologies and things like environmental DNA to help us monitor these habitats and the species living in them has really made a big difference in allowing us to do extensive monitoring work that would have been very difficult and expensive without this aid. It allows us to find species in locations that are very challenging to survey in, and it allows us to very more quickly, efficiently, and cost effectively keep an eye on what's happening in the wild. The third example I want to talk to you about is about the Jubamina, the Teichochromis insulatus. It's a cichlid critically endangered from Madagascar. This shows a picture of a male, one of two males, which were the last two of their kind, two of the last four in London Zoo back in 2013, when a survey was conducted to find out how many zoos and aquariums were keeping Malagasy cichlids, many of which were thought to already be lost in the wild because the watersheds they were living in had dried up. We found out that there was only two males in London Zoo and a male and female at Berlin Zoo. And unfortunately, the male at Berlin Zoo killed the female, which triggered this launch, this fish appeal to try and find a female. London Zoo decided to launch this appeal to see if there was anybody out there globally that was keeping this fish. We didn't have much hope. We didn't believe necessarily there was a female out there, but what we didn't expect was the huge amount of interest in this story. Normally, all the attention goes to pandas and tigers and elephants, and we didn't think a freshwater fish would actually attract the world's attention, but it really did. In fact, we had an amazing amount of public interest and press interest in the story. We reached over 174 outlets in 100 countries, which over almost 64 million people in print. That doesn't include social media interest, international radio and TV broadcasts. It really became something that captured people's imagination. This led to an expedition. We received funding because of the interest from a variety of different sources. And we went into Madagascar and over the course of a month, surveyed the last remaining wet areas where the fish may have potentially been found. And we managed to rediscover the fish in a few small intermittent pools in the headwaters of the river from which it was originally described. We rescued some of these fish species and took them to a series of ponds that were dug by our project partner in Madagascar with the hope of trying to establish safety net populations of these fish in the wild. We put the fish in the pond, 19 of them we managed to collect from the river with the hopes that they would breed. And we were hugely surprised within 2 years that huge numbers of these fish were produced in these safety net ponds. And they now go on to form multiple populations that are used for community fish ponds in local communities in the area where they're found. And they take the place of fish farms using tilapia, an alien invasive species introduced around the world. And they're actually used not only as a food source, but also as a potential repository and reintroduction source for these fish to be returned to the wild. The amount of media attention after this event and the expedition didn't subside. More and more interest continues to take hold with this species through a variety of different means. Comic strips and stories continue, podcasts related to this. And there's been so much attention, so much so that in 2013, Scientific American considered it potentially one of the greatest conservation success stories of the year. So it's a fantastic thing to get this amount of attention for what was previously a freshwater fish species that pretty much nobody had heard of. If you want to hear more about this story and learn more about it, there's a temporary exhibition which tracks the entire story over the last 10 years going on in an aquarium in Paris at Port Doré. which through an incredible, amazing, and interesting comic book style tells the story of the fish in its saving from the origins at London Zoo back in 2013 to where it is now in Madagascar. And it's really worth going and seeing. So yes, 1,000 fishes by 2035. I think it's definitely achievable. I think that the examples I've just shared with you show that a lot can be done, oftentimes with very little money, but with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of support and dedication. So I do think if we harness the interest and the power of more people, we can actually achieve the 1,000 fishes with conservation action by 2035. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Brian. Really good to end on a positive note like that. And the Joe Bermina case study with the media really proves how the general public can be inspired and amazed by freshwater fish. That's really good to see. Mike, over to, oh, actually quickly. Yeah, really urge you to send in any questions you might have. It's a really good opportunity to pick the panelists' brains. If you think of any questions throughout the presentations, just put them in the Q&A and we'll get around to them after the presentations. So yeah, thanks, Mike.
Oh, thanks to you, Mike, too. And can you see that's the slide? Just checking. Hello?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's all in full screen. It looks good.
Yes, so good morning from the UK to everybody, wherever you are. It's a very strange feeling to be talking to people and not being able to see them, but it's a pleasure to present to you now the actual blueprint. So up till now, Brian has been explaining the enormous amount of work and the amount of data that's came from the red list to identify the patterns and the priorities for freshwater fish conservation, so that we can put together this blueprint. And what I'll be presenting over the next few minutes will be the actual blueprint and actually how we plan what we think we should do action to save this 1,000 fishes. So a little bit of background to SHOAL for those who don't know us. So SHOAL was set up in 2019, and it came to be after discussions between a number of sort of leading conservation organizations, representatives from zoos and aquaria, from the private aquaria hobby, and from anglers. And a presentation was made to show what a desperate situation that freshwater fishes and freshwater species in general are in. So, and it was decided that we had to take some action, and the result of that meeting was SHOAL. And SHOAL was deliberately created as an initiative, as a network of partners working together, because we recognized that creating a new organization that was going to compete for more conservation resources and have to establish capacity right across the globe would just take too much time and would be unwieldy. And so the idea of having a network of and building on the capacity that does exist was considered to be the most effective way of really rapidly accelerating the capacity and building the capacity for action across the world. So in 2019, the SHOAL was initiated. It was agreed to be synchronously earthed and then rewild, agreed to host SHOAL. So that meant that SHOAL could get moving straight away and have a strong foundation base. And very quickly, partners came on board and projects became identified, and funding was sought for a number of different projects across the globe. And by now, the supported projects and partners pretty much in every corner of the world, and all of them very much focused on protecting and threatened fishes, but also threatened freshwater species. And freshwater, the goal of SHOAL is to accelerate the conservation of freshwater species in general, but the main focus is on fish in the hope that that will cover many of the other species that also live in these freshwater habitats across the globe. So after a few years of running SHOAL, we decided to take a step back and say, okay, if we now really want to step up and really make a difference, which is desperately needed, as you could hear from the presentation from Brian, how can we do that across the entire globe as fast as possible? And so we did the analysis together with the various parts of IUCN based on the IUCN red listing data, and began to understand, okay, these are the patterns, these are the priorities, and this is what we need to do difference as fast as possible across the first approaches that were targeting the most threatened fishes. So as you heard from Brian, we selected the most threatened fishes, and the concept is to focus as directly as possible on the conservation of each one of those species, rather than taking a much broader approach in terms of watershed management or dealing with large-scale threats such as dams or pollution. So this approach is really targeting very, very directly the conservation needs of each individual fish, whether it's one individual fish in one habitat or a number of priority fishes in a single habitat like a lake or oasis or something like that. So, but the important thing to note is that it's really very, very targeted, and to do that, the most important players are the local stakeholders and conservation agencies really working at the front line. So really ultimately responsible and able to sustain the conservation action for these individual species very much at the local level. There was a beginning again, there was no intention of creating an organization like SHOAL where we'd have SHOAL people in different parts of the world, SHOAL projects. All the action will be directed and focused through other organizations, building the capacity of those organizations. And that is extremely one of the extreme limitations of SHOAL at the moment, because many of these conservation communities don't exist, or conservation organizations at the local level don't exist or don't have the capacity. So one of the big challenges and one of the major focus for SHOAL is to build that capacity across the globe. We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. So, and a third side of it is really creating this SHOAL, and without having that strong base of partners either at the strategic level or the local level, we're not going to really be able to achieve the ambitions that we have, whether it's 1,000 fishes or even just focusing much more on freshwater fishes. So the idea of working together and using the powers of each individual's organizations or individuals or whatever the body is creating a really strong movement for change. And underlying all of that is to base everything on the best available science. And so for the blueprint, we use the red listing data, and the red listing data is an incredible database, all provided on a voluntary basis across the globe, and it's an enormous amount of information and data. Obviously, with the scale of the task of monitoring and understanding the status of each of these fishes, there's still huge gaps in the data, but it's definitely the best set of data that we have to start really making decisions about where to work and monitoring the progress of any conservation actions. So with those four fundamental approaches, we then are rolling out SHOAL across the world under what we call three types of partners. The first type of partner are the strategic partners, and they're things like international conservation organizations, zoos, aquaria, universities, museums, funding agencies, and all those organisations and partners that can really help provide their skills, their experience, their capacity to really make a difference, and to help accelerate and provide us a framework across the world for more and more action. But ultimately, what we really need are the local action partners that are really doing the work on the ground. And Brian explained a lot of the work that they were doing in Madagascar and Greece and Mexico was really led and managed and maintained by local action partners. And this is really where the focus of the shoal has to be if we really are serious about making a difference for freshwater habitats and freshwater fishes. And the role of the strategic partners is to provide the capacity and the skills that support those, ultimately to support those local action partners. And the third group are what we call the core team of SHOAL, which is just there to be like the spider in the web, to link the strategic partners, to enroll the strategic partners, to identify local action partners, to help channel resources and capacity to the right places. And the idea is to maintain that as a very small group, but to help leverage the capacity and the skills that are within the strategic partners and within the local action partners. So the blueprint. So the blueprint is described through 7 strategies, and I'll go through each one of these, and each one of these are just as important as each other. So the first strategy is, again, talking about the shoal, building and strengthening the shoal. So if we want to get to 1,000 fishes, we need a large number of organizations that have the capacity. And again, as we saw from Brian's example, the most successful conservation projects, for, at least for fish, is when different agencies and different organizations are working together and bringing their capacity and their skills together. And we're seeing this already with shoal, where examples of where universities are linking up with major conservation organizations, donors are coming in to support the project, and local agencies are really building their capacity and understanding about to manage these areas. And so building this and strengthening the shoal is fundamental, and the most potentially one of the most important parts of what we're doing. The second strategy is to look at, again, the aim of these strategies are to get to that 1,000 fishes as fast as possible and as effectively as possible. And we believe that many of the fishes, many of these priority fishes, perhaps already fall within protected areas or within some sort of protection measures. And we were hoping to do this as part of the development of the blueprint, but we very quickly realized that this was quite a significant piece of work to do, to go through all the 2,338 species and really understand the present protection status. So many of these species probably fall within existing protected areas or partly within protected areas, but the protected area managers are totally unaware of the existence of these fishes and the importance of these fishes in those areas. And so we're hoping that by simply working with some of those protected area managers, we can shift their management plans to put some emphasis on the needs of these fishes. And very often maybe there's 1 or 2 elements of the conservation action for these fishes that have been neglected that could be quite easily put into place. And by undertaking this analysis and linking up with these different protection measures, that we can very quickly accelerate quite a few fish species to ensure that they no longer are threatened. And we're hoping to do that work within this year. So we're looking now to raise the funds and find the experts or the institution that would like to undertake this work, and hopefully within the next year this piece of work will be completed. The third strategy is recognizing that the approach that we're taking with 1,000 fishes is very direct and is very focused right at the local level, and it won't necessarily tackle all the key underlying root causes of freshwater habitat loss and freshwater species loss, and that some of the and we also need expertise in some areas that are threats for fishes. So, for instance, we've listed here just a few examples of some of the other initiatives that are going on that complement the work that we're doing with 1,000 fishes and are completely necessary to make up the full picture. And I'm sure there's many other initiatives not listed here, but are also very important. So, for example, Freshwater Life, they focus on invasive species and the impact of invasive species on freshwater fishes, on freshwater life in general, and which is a major issue for many of the freshwater fishes we're focusing on. And so the work that they're doing in terms of research and bringing expertise to invasive understanding how to deal with invasive species is critical to the work that we're trying to do under 1,000 fishes. And you can say that for all these other initiatives, such as the World Fish Migration, which was really focusing on the issues of fish and the free-flowing rivers. The Alliance for Freshwater Life is a powerful alliance of scientists and anybody really that's working on freshwater conservation and bringing their expertise and sharing lessons to have an impact. The Freshwater Challenge, a big global challenge to protect freshwater habitats, and many other like ASAP, which is focusing on critically endangered species in Southeast Asia. The fourth strategy is recognizing that many of these fishes are recognizing two factors. Many of these fishes need ex situ conservation action. Some of them are already extinct in the wild and completely rely on the ex situ populations. And many are very suitable for ex situ conservation, as long as we can also maintain and protect their habitat. And the second side of this is recognizing the real strength and power, the latent power that's within zoos and aquaria across the world to support freshwater fish conservation. And you see many examples. Brian again brought up examples about how the zoos and aquaria have been involved in this already, but the potential to do much more is there. And so we're bringing together the zoos and aquaria to focus on four things to support freshwater fish conservation. That's helping to inspire people, helping to raise awareness and mobilize more action, helping to do ex situ conservation, or really leading the work on ex situ conservation. The third one is helping to build capacity with partners, particularly in knowledge about how to breed fish, how to do ex situ conservation at the local level. And the fourth one is to help raise funds for critical projects across the world, which they're all already doing, but we could definitely scale that up. So this is a very powerful way of showing how bringing together really critical strategic partners can make a massive difference over a short amount of time if we can really mobilize the capacity there and work together. And also related to that is recognizing under Strategy 5 that there's a huge support for freshwater fish in terms of the aquarium hobby, whether it's through angling, and very importantly for local fisheries or commercial fisheries interests. And we heard from Brian that there's nearly 1,000 species listed under out of the 2,000, nearly half of the fishes are considered to be important for and a special interest for people. And these if we can really maximize on the potential of these interest groups and bring them much more involved in freshwater fish conservation and linking those up, because protection of fisheries and conservation of threatened species are the same thing, and very often they're being treated separately. The hobbyists have an enormous amount of information and understanding and love and passion for freshwater fish. And there has been some linkages with freshwater fish conservation, but up till now, we really haven't seen the potential there that we can do. So one of the strategies is really to bring these interest groups much deeper and further into freshwater fish conservation. And strategy 6 is dealing with the fact that we can't ignore the situation that there's so many data deficient and unevaluated species. And so the data that we've used for this analysis is enormous and powerful, but there's still quite a major gap in terms of understanding the conservation status of many of the fishes, and is without doubt, so once those have been evaluated, the list of threatened species will increase. And so therefore, we will also aim to accelerate work to get a better understanding of these data deficient species and those species that still haven't been evaluated. And we're looking to do, you can see the map where the highest concentration of these data deficient species are, and they will help form the priorities and the focus for the action for the initiative. And then the final strategy, strategy 7, is basically based on the idea that to get to 1,000 fishes, we need to prioritize some of our actions and to be much more efficient. So what we did was basically took the data in terms of priorities that Brian explained and started overlaying those and beginning to understand, okay, where are those places and what genera, for instance, that we need to focus on if we want to get the biggest bang for our buck. And so the first thing was to look at priority areas. So we identified 37 priority areas where there's a high concentration of these priority fishes. And if we focus in some of those places, like the Western Ghats, for instance, you can see that here, that you're going to hear from Rajeev in a minute, that if we focus on our efforts in these areas, we're going to quickly accelerate the number of fishes that are getting conservation action targeted for them. And the same way with the priority genera. We recognize that some genera have the same sort of geography together. They also fall within many of these priority areas, but also that the scientists and the interest groups quite often work around general or related or general scale groupings. So, for instance, there's a lot of work we heard about from the Goodyears group. There's work on Paraphomenus and Marcia, and so we can really start to frame some of those work, some of our work around some of these priority genera, and to have, again, with the idea to have a bigger bang with the same amount of money and resources. Again, we've identified a number of priority lakes where we can concentrate our work, and some of those priority landscapes and priority habitats that Brian went through, the springs and oases, the peat swamps and karst and limestone, and also the edge species, and making sure that by targeting a number of species, we're also ensuring that these edge species are high priority too for action. So when we overlapped all this work and all this data and this understanding, ultimately what we came up with was a map of 36 priority countries. And and the idea of this is that we can then focus on a limited number of countries and focus our attention. So it looks like we haven't prioritized because there's large areas like the US and Russia and China and India, but it's just identifying those countries which we will be taking action, and it will be within limited areas generally in those countries. But these are the countries where clearly we really need to have the capacity and the strategic partners and the local action partners to really make a difference. And in some places like the US and Australia maybe already has the capacity. So we're probably not going to spend too much of our time fundraising for those places, but really helping to mobilize the partners that can make a difference in those countries. But in some countries, there is a really severe lack of capacity, a severe lack of funding, and a severe lack of action for freshwater fishes. And in those countries, we need to build up the capacity, create new local action partners, bring together different strategic partners that can help the work in those countries, and these will form the focus of much of the attention of the initiative. However, the target is to focus on the 2,338 species. So anybody that wants to do any conservation action for any of those species, any in the world, we fully welcome them. This is just another way of prioritizing our attention and our work and the limited resources ultimately we will have over the next 10 years. So the path to success will start out slowly. So we don't want to build up expectations that this graph will go straight up, and every year we're just getting 200 species. It's going to take some time as we build up the strategic partners, we build up the funding base, we build up the capacity across the world. But ultimately, it's feasible that by 2035 we will have 1,000 fishes under some level of conservation action, and that's going to benefit many other things as well. It's not just going to be freshwater fish, but some habitats, the local commercial fisheries, supporting hobby-based economies, and again also improving the IUCN Red List data, so that we can still further work on understanding the situation for freshwater fish across the world. So please, if you're interested to join the SHOAL, if you have a conservation project you're interested in, you're a conservation partner, you're a zoo and aquarium that you want to join the Alliance, come and join us, and let's really go for this target of 1,000 fishes by 2035. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Mike. And it's worth mentioning that if you'd like any more information on the blueprint or on any of the presentations, please do email info@shoalconservation.org, or just put some questions in the chat, as a couple of people already have. Maybe it's worth just coming onto these quickly because they're relevant to what Mike was just talking about. The first one, Mike, is relevant to Strategy 5, engaging hobbyists, from Matthew Bond. He asks, given the wealth of experience and potential funding streams, what do you see the role of private aquaria community is in supporting conservation of freshwater fish species?
Yeah, this is a question that we're asked quite a bit, and SHOAL was certainly set up with a strong intention to bring together the capacity and the love and the passion and the wealth of knowledge from the private aquaria community. And certainly they've been in examples that Brian was showing, and examples that we're going to hear, that we hear about a lot, of where the private aquaria community have been able to provide fishes to ex situ programs, but also their knowledge in terms of breeding techniques, the knowledge of the habitats, and also that just bringing their passion and their love for these fishes is an important part of generating more and more engagement and more awareness of the incredible freshwater fishes of the world. And also the other side of it, what we've been trying to do is to bring those companies that support the private aquaria hobby much more into conservation. And there's definitely a strong willingness within that community to support freshwater fish conservation, but the worlds have been quite separated for a long time, and there's many ways that we can bring them together. And there has been obviously some issues with the hobby in the past in terms of releasing fishes that become invasives, etc., or maybe overexploitation of certain species. And the hobby well recognizes that they can make a big difference by themselves, but this will take some time to change that, to build on that potential.
Brilliant, thank you. And Jose Barrio asks, do you consider sustainable fishing of ornamental species a tool to engage local communities in conserving habitats and species?
Okay, as an example, ask me again.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. I think that at the moment there's only one real good example of where this has been attempted, and that's Project Piaba, and which is quite famous within the fish, ornamental fish community. There's definitely potential for this, and it could be a really important tool for, like you say, engaging communities, increasing livelihoods. But there's also we have to be very careful with this, but there's certainly opportunities there to do that. But we possibly need more examples of how to do it and how well it can be managed, whether it really will support the fish and the local communities, and ensure the welfare of any fishes that are being targeted for that. So there's lots of difficulties around it, but it could be a really powerful conservation opportunity.
Brilliant. And there's a couple more questions that are relevant to the blueprint as well. So maybe we'll ask them first and then go to Rajeev. David Aparici asks, are you including some monitor and evaluation in the plan, and where would it fit in the timeline, considering how fast things can change in the wild?
There's great questions. So obviously one of the key things we need to do to understand if we're reaching 1,000 fishes is to monitor what's going on particularly for these 2,338 and any additional fishes that come in because they've been evaluated or not become data deficient anymore. So and the manner that we're planning to do it is to again use that network, and in particularly the Freshwater Fish Specialist Group, which has a global reach, but also again quite limited in their capacity. So the aim is to try and find some funding particularly to focus on this work. But if we can't find that funding, then we will use the opportunity to get information from this incredible network of partners, in particularly the Freshwater Fish Specialist Group, which is Brian and Rajeev are major players in that. I don't know if they want to say anything.
No, maybe not. Brian, Rajeev, anything you want to add to that?
Yes. Does it look all right, the slides?
The slides look great. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
All right, thanks. So thank you for this kind invitation. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. SHOAL is an organization that's very close to my heart since I've been involved with the initiative right from its early days. And I consider it as a privilege to serve on the advisory board of the initiative, and working with lots of partners from around the world, doing our bit to advance the science of freshwater conservation. So my intention for today is to give you an introduction to the freshwater conservation challenges in the Western Ghats, and also briefly touch upon a few projects that we have been undertaking for the past few years, mostly with the support of SHOAL and also other local and international partners. So yes, that's slide 2. Yeah. Okay. So the Western Ghats is basically one of the world's topmost biodiversity hotspots. Although it's popular from a terrestrial point of view, the freshwater ecosystems of the Western Ghats are also extremely rich in freshwater fish, crabs, mollusks, different other crustaceans, aquatic plants. So it's considered one of the most important freshwater ecoregions of the world. Even from a hydrological point of view, as you can see, it's a catchment area for almost 40% of the Indian river systems. Is one of the 3 main watersheds of India. So it's important from the biodiversity point of view, from the human community point of view. Yeah, and as I said, it's extremely rich in freshwater fish diversity. We have around 350 plus species. We've got new species being discovered on a monthly basis from this region. And when you talk about the exceptional sort of diversity here, it's just not from the point of view of species richness, but also from the point of view of endemism. Almost 65% of fish that live in the Western Ghats are found nowhere else on Earth. That raises the importance of the region. And mostly when we talk about endemism, we talk about endemism at the species level. But here we have endemism at higher taxonomic levels, like we've got 22 genera which are endemic to this region. We've got 2 endemic families. So that's another interesting part of the Western Ghats fauna, because normally when we talk about fish families, they're very widespread across countries, across continents. We've got 2 strictly endemic families that are found only in the Western Ghats. So it's exceptionally rich from different angles. Sorry, yeah. And this endemism is very micro level or micro scale, because it's we've got 45 odd species that are found only in either one river or 2 adjoining river systems. So a very sort of restricted range species. We've even got lots of coined endemics, just one single location, and you don't save the fish there, you lose the fish forever. So possibly 20 odd species are single location point endemics in the Western Ghats. So that was all about species. We also have exceptionally unique regions in the Western Ghats. For example, this example of a small lake stream system inside a highly protected tiger reserve. It's called the Periyar Tiger Reserve. We've got 8 point endemic fish just restricted to this very small area of around 300 square kilometers, which includes, out of the 8 point endemics, 7 are either endangered or vulnerable, so they're all threatened, and one of them is data deficient. So we have extremely interesting, very small regions like this, which are the only remaining sort of home for very unique point endemic threatened species. So they're all alliance for zero extinction sites, which is another way that you can raise the profile of these habitats and landscapes. So there's also so much of evolutionary distinctiveness in the Western Ghats. So it's just not normal diversity, endemism threats. So they're also extremely unique organisms from an evolutionary point of view. Many of the genera, so there are monotypic, meaning there's just one species within that genus. So it's a completely distinct sort of branch of the evolutionary tree of life. We've even got 2 monotypic families. So the 2 endemic families that I talked about, they just have one genus and one species. So, extremely unique from an evolutionary point of view. Many of them are extremely ancient relics. We've dated fish that go all the way to 120 million years ago, when they sort of originated in the Gondwana and supercontinent. So the region is completely unique from a species diversity point of view, from an endemism point of view, from an evolutionary distinctiveness point of view. They're all there. But it's just not about fish. It's also about the human communities, the people who live in these, in this landscape. For example, the Western Ghats is one of the hotspots with the highest human population density and pressure. Almost 500 people live within a square kilometer area. So it's extremely thickly packed sort of human population density. And right now we've got around 50 million people, approximately 50 million people that would go all the way to 600 million by 2050. So that's predictions of huge population increase in the Western Ghats. So all of this would, no doubt impact the freshwater ecosystems, the fish that live, not just fish, but all of the sort of biodiversity that live in these ecosystems. We've also got a connection to forest cover in this region, because we lost almost 35% of the forest cover in the last possibly 90 years or a century. So that's also another big challenge we have to protect the upper catchments of these river systems. So the Western Ghats fish is in a free fall. So we had a comprehensive red list assessment way back in 2011. So almost 14 years ago. where we assessed almost 1/3 of all of the Western Ghats species to be threatened, and so that's all species in the Western Ghats, all fish species in the Western Ghats. And if you only look at those 65% of endemic species, it's so 50% of all endemic species in the Western Ghats are threatened. So that's also another issue with the threat status. So what are the threats influencing the fish biodiversity of the Western Ghats? So we have a range of threats. So any sort of threats that you can think of, any sort of stressors that you can think of has an impact on the freshwater ecosystems of the Western Ghats. So we've got pollution, as Brian was talking about. We've got unsustainable fishing and exploitation is a big threat. Alien species, for example, this photograph is from a reservoir in the Western Ghats, which once, maybe 20, 30 years ago, used to harbor as many as 25 to 30 native species. And right now, the only two species that live in this reservoir is the African catfish and the common carp, two alien species. So that's the sort of population declines that you're seeing in front of your eyes of native fish species getting locally extinct in many sorts of freshwater ecosystems in the Western Ghats. So despite the presence of a lot of threatened species, endemic species, evolutionary distinct species, we don't really have a single species conservation action plan in place. Not a single species of endangered or critically endangered species in the Western Ghats that receives any sort of conservation attention. So that's the situation here in this landscape. So it's not that we don't have threatened species or we don't have threats. They're all there, but there's nothing being actually done to find solutions to help species recovery or species conservation. So basically, freshwater fish, as Brian was rightly putting it in context, so the world has ignored and neglected freshwater fish for decades, and SHOAL is possibly a blessing where we have a global consortium now, bringing all of these players together to try and save a lot of freshwater fish in many regions of the world. So basically, we have two issues as far as the Western Ghats. I'm sure this is also the same situation in many other parts of the world. We have a perception challenge where people are just disconnected to freshwater fish conservation. Many people are not aware about freshwater fish, the issues that they face. And we also have a big knowledge impediment where we just don't have the baseline information that is required to inform conservation action for many of these fish species. So we have Western Ghats as one of the priority areas for SHOAL's blueprint of 1,000 fishes. So that's something that we are looking forward to, working with SHOAL and other international and local partners, trying to secure the future for at least a few dozen species of the Western Ghats, which require immediate conservation attention. So the next part of my talk will focus on three interesting conservation projects that is underway in the Western Ghats, mostly thanks to SHOAL and other local and regional and international funders and donors. And so the first one is an interesting project on a megafish, the humpback marcy that grows up to 60 kilograms in weight. It's one of the world's largest, but unfortunately the world's rarest marcy species as well. So this is a project that we started way back in 2012 informally, but then it's slowly picking up with support of SHOAL and other partners. And so the whole idea is to make sure that the future of this megafish is secured in the only river system that where it is found in the Western Ghats. So it's a species that is only restricted to a single river system in the Western Ghats. So it's critically endangered on the IUCN red list, but as you can see, it doesn't do any good. There's no sort of policies or laws in place that prohibits sort of exploitation. That you can see a large adult that was caught during the COVID lockdown. The species has a very fragmented population, so it's just found in a single river, but it's in a few pockets in the upper tributaries. So that's also a cause for concern when you have a sort of a fragmented population for a critically endangered species. There's also a lack of active recruitment happening due to various threats in the system. There's a lot of habitat deterioration that has taken place, lots of hydropower dams, linear infrastructures on the main stems of the river. There's lots of pollution. So all of this has affected the populations of this mega fish. So we're trying to work through this project. So this is our, a research associate who works on this. So he's a participant in this webinar. He's joining on this webinar. Denson, so he's working with us, trying to understand the threats to the humpback mahseer. So we've identified three major threats, one of which is also very closely related to the humpback mahseer because it's the indiscriminate stalking or unmanaged stalking of non-native mahseer species, which are competing with the humpback mahseer in this only known range. So that's the biggest sort of challenge that we have right now. So this particular photo is of a hybrid mahseer in this river system. So there's also, as I said, lots of habitat loss that's taking place because of hydropower dam and linear infrastructure and irrigation structures and so on. There's also overexploitation. If you remember the previous slide that I showed you, there's even huge fish that are being caught illegally from different parts of its range. So basically, in this part of the world, conserving fish and managing its fisheries, it's a difficult balancing act. So the whole domain of conservation, which actually is preservation and protection of biodiversity, and the management, which is basically focusing on sustainable use or sustainable trade of exploitable or harvestable species. They've never sort of talked to each other. They have two different sorts of domains that are largely treated differently. So we have this problem of saving fish that are threatened, but also these fish contribute to livelihoods and food security. So that's a debate that still rages on. So for which we don't really have a sort of solution in place. But at most of the time, we are also unable to engage with policymakers and biodiversity managers because we don't really have baseline information to sort of educate and inform them on population status or population trends of these threatened species, information on their biology, life history, ecology. So all of that are big knowledge gaps, which we have to work on in the future. So all of this has implications on management plans, policies, and basically sort of engaging with people who make decisions. So our idea is to basically come up with a systematic conservation plan, and for which we have sort of advanced a bit thanks to all of these projects that have been happening in this on this species for the past 3 or 4 years. So we've started to map the micro level distribution of the species. We've also starting to map the critical habitats, critical spawning habitats, early level sort of habitats that sustain juveniles, etc. So we managed to sort of come up with a lot of information from the time we started this project, and we hope to go on with this project for the next 1 or 2 years. So we also know that successful conservation plans require active community participation. So communities, local communities, are an integral part of our all of our projects, in fact. And so for this project, we work a lot with the local tribal communities, seeking their participation, taking their traditional knowledge. All of that is integrated in the whole sort of conservation plans that we are sort of developing. So also some strategic outreach and marketing, campaigns, education awareness campaigns that we've been doing through, comic strips and illustrations, and there's also a full-fledged storybook that one of our partners from Mahseer Trust has written. A story about the humpback mahseer, which is highly popular among the kids of the region. So we're trying different sort of approaches, and bringing all of them together. Trying to save this giant fish. The second interesting story is about fish that live beneath our feet. So these are underground fish that live in aquifers, fish that live in caves. So mostly fish that are not really, seen by people, not appreciated by people. So the Western Ghats, not really the mountains as such, but the lowland regions of the Western Ghats are home to an exceptional sort of assemblage of very unique groundwater and subterranean fish. And all of them are, very bizarre, have a bizarre morphology. They either come without eyes, they're blind fish, they're fish without fins, they're fish without sort of body pigments. So they're all extremely, bizarre fish. And thanks to SHOAL, we've just started in January a project that is looking at understanding the diversity of these organisms, the micro level distribution, trying to work with local communities, to save these fish. So all of that is happening. So basically, unlike working in a river or a lake or even any other surface water systems, finding this fish is a big challenge. And so they all live in underground systems, and there's no way that these systems are accessible to us. So basically, the whole idea is citizen science, community participation, outreach. So we have the slogan of, to find the fish, you need to find the people who know the fish, and also, sort of work with them, trying to understand, different, objectives that we have in this project. So I would say this is a project that entirely relies on the knowledge that is available with the local communities. As scientists, we have very little to do on these groundwater fish, and this is a perfect example of a citizen science, totally citizen science based freshwater fish conservation project, where the local people and there are certain communities that are closely related to these underground water distribution systems like wells. There are people who clean the wells. There are people who dig these wells. So we've got into a sort of association with these people. So they keep helping us find the fish. They help us with information on this fish. So that's something that was very different from the sort of work that I've been doing for the last 15, 20 years on river and lake fish, where we go into a river or lake with nets trying to find our fish. So this project has been entirely different in a new dimension. So as I said, it's difficult to find the fish, and we have to rely on serendipity, or they're all opportunistic sort of observations that we have on this fish. So we're also trying advanced approaches like environmental DNA, trying to understand if we can use environmental DNA to map the distribution of these organisms, and also to sort of understand diversity that we cannot really see. So we've come a long way with this project, although it started a few years ago. The whole SHOAL sort of consortium developed very recently. So we've been able to improve the science and knowledge on many of these species. So we've discovered lots of new species. Many of them were highlighted in SHOAL's annual reports of top species discoveries, freshwater fish discoveries from the world. We've had new locality informations coming in. We've helped raise the profile of these species. There's lots of media attention that has been happening, including international media, National Geographic, BBC. All of that has been very helpful. Rewild, the partners of SHOAL, and also thanks to Leonardo DiCaprio, there was also a big attention on a fish that popped out of a shower in this region last year. So all of that is happening. So we've managed to get media on our site. So those who are listening to Topus talk yesterday, and also Brian's talk today. So there's lots of media help that can go a long way in the conservation of freshwater fish, which otherwise are largely ignored by that section of the community. So this is also a project which defines a SHOAL. It brings a lot of partners, a lot of consortiums together. So from the time we started this project, we've been slowly building local and international partners to this project. So we've got international museums, working and collaborating with us. We've got local government organizations, local NGOs, local colleges. So there's a whole SHOAL being slowly, built, and we hope this would get stronger as we progress on this project. The third project is another sort of very high-profile project that SHOAL initiated last year. It's called Dennis and Friends. which tries to save the redline torpedo barb for those who keep fish in home aquariums. This is one of the most popular cyprinid fish, which is much in demand throughout the world, and it's a popular aquarium fish. It's unfortunately it's endangered because of a lot of reasons, just not exploitation, but a whole range of threats that are acting in its critical habitats. So there's a lot of bycatch. These fish tend to get unintentionally caught when local fishers catch other cyprinids. There's also sand mining. There's habitat loss due to other reasons. There's pollution. So all of this is happening. So we're trying to understand the sort of distribution. So this was also one of the most exploited aquarium fish from India over a period of 10-15 years, from 2005 or 2000 until 2015. And so we're trying to see if many of these populations have recovered, what sort of population status and abundance are there in the habitats where once they used to occur in. We're also trying to work with local communities, trying to engage with them, trying to understand their willingness to protect these habitats, willingness to conserve the fish, which is slowly happening. It takes some time to engage with these people who were otherwise sort of either engaged in collection of redline torpedo barbs or sand mining. So the people who engage with sand mining who are now sort of engaging with us, trying to protect these habitats. So that's also, so the whole purpose is to come up with or identify and develop at least a few suitable community conserved areas where we can not only conserve the redline torpedo barb, but rather use the redline torpedo barb as a surrogate, and then try to protect many cyprinids and other freshwater fish, many of which are threatened. So that's another project in progress. So I think from my experiences of working in this region, it's the most important thing is this connection that we need. We need to have more people engaged in freshwater fish conservation, kids, youth. So that's the main idea that we have been sort of putting forward, trying to work with a whole range of stakeholders. The most important of which is children. So this is from a project that one of our partners, Marcy Trust, has been doing, trying to work with children, telling them about the importance of freshwater biodiversity, what sort of fish live in these interesting water bodies, etc. So I think that's the future for freshwater biodiversity in this region. So I would like to leave you with this very depressing slide of what might happen in the Western Ghats in the next 20-30 years. So Western Ghats is considered to be one of the regions which would face extreme freshwater shortage by the year 2050. And when you have urbanites without fresh water for their daily sort of uses, like drinking water or irrigation and hydropower, I don't see much future for freshwater fish that live in this system, unless we have a very strong-willed consortiums, initiatives, and plans in place, trying to save as many fish that we can that live in these systems. So with that, thank you very much. And if there are questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Rajeev. It's amazing to see those freshwater fishes and habitats in the Western Ghats. I'm kind of keen to pack my bags and hop on a flight and head over there. It looks incredible. And really good point that you made to find the fish, find the people, and work with them. Many people on who are attending will know that Rajeev and his team have been very successful, as he alluded to, in finding and describing lots of new species, some incredible fish species underground, some of which are covered in SHOAL's new species reports, as Rajeev said. So you can go to the website and have a look at them. So there are a few questions that have come in. Thanks everybody for your questions. Some really interesting questions here. Maxine Moe asks, for the humpback marsia, I think this will probably be a question to Rajeev and to Mike. For the humpback marsia, could community-based conservation be more effective, similar to what has been done for the arapaima in Brazil, since it's a very important food fish for the local communities?
Should I take it first, or Brian?
Yeah, if you're happy to, I think so.
Yeah, so that's the whole point of our project, is basically to work with communities. So that's what we're doing for the last several years. So they'll be working with tribal communities so there are also tribal communities. If you remember one of the slides where I showed you a member of the tribal community praying, in front of the river. So they do consider this as the fish as a god or a goddess. So there are communities who are, extremely sort of, protective of these habitats and the fish they live in. So we're trying to, engage with them. There are also the other community that we are trying to engage with is recreational anglers who have been, the sort of mainstay of our project, trying, giving us information on distribution, giving us distribution data, data on threats, all of those things. So I think definitely community-based conservation is the way to go, and that is what we are trying to do with the humpback master. So we do have the science component there, but I'm sure with the successful examples of Arapaima conservation in Brazil and other parts of South America. So we do take note of that. We have in fact taken a few points from what the Arapaima management Arapaima conservation plans have done in South America, and we do try to sort of adapt that to our conditions here. So it's a slow process because working with communities takes a long time, especially when you have communities who are dependent on fish for their livelihood, and it takes some time to slowly wean them away from the sort of exploitative mindset to a conservation mindset.
Brilliant, thank you. I don't know if Michael or Brian want to add anything to that as well.
Yeah, I could just add on a little bit. I think what Maxine is talking about as well with the Arapaima is that the initiative there has given the local communities the rights to protect areas and sell the Arapaima into the market, and then by doing that they protect an enormous piece of sort of forest and river habitat as well. So not only protecting the Arapaima but also protecting quite a bit more, and it's an extraordinarily great example of new initiatives that could be taken to support communities and fish conservation. And I know that Rajeev that's also looking into the possibilities in similar things, and you've also got the angling angle too with both of those species, in fact. So yeah, there's got opportunities there, but as Rajeev said, it's complicated and takes time to work with the communities and find their solutions.
Brilliant. And Rameshwari, just on the India, while we're on there talking about India, Rameshwari Yunman asks, why in northeast India, with so much diversity of freshwater fish, why is it not included in the priority area for SHOAL for funding for conservation? We have more than 400 species of freshwater fishes, and already so many that are threatened. Maybe that's one for Mike.
Yeah, I could answer. I don't know. Rajeev is certainly the expert on India rather than me, but it's a good, it's a very, very good question, and something that would be really important to say, that the priority areas are those areas where there's a very high concentration of our priority fishes. So the fishes that we selected as priority fishes, where they're highly concentrated. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's other areas in the world that really also are very important for other fishes. So we've identified 37, I think 37 priority areas whereby we can achieve the focus on a number of fishes with relatively less resources compared to other areas. But it's really not a message to say that we're only focusing on those areas. It's really important. Northeast India clearly is an important area for freshwater fishes. Many of the fishes on our priority list are in Northeast India, and we is to encourage people to work on these fishes anywhere in the world, wherever they are. But there are some places where we know that if we can concentrate some resources, we're going to have a faster impact. But certainly, we're not ignoring any other area or any other fish that is threatened. but maybe Rajeev can say something about the patterns of diversity in India. Or...
Yeah, no, I think I certainly agree with what Rameshwari said, because the Eastern Himalaya, the Northeast, is also extremely important from a fish diversity and endemism point of view. We are also trying to sort of update the conservation assessments for the Northeast region. So that's a project that we are, doing right now, because the assessments from the Eastern Himalaya, the Northeast region is old by, it's outdated by almost 15 years, and we've not been able to sort of update the assessments. And we've got a huge number of data deficient species in that area. So over the last 2 years, we've the IUCN FFSG and the Freshwater Biodiversity Unit with local partners, including Rameshwari. So she's a key partner in the region. So we're slowly trying to update all of the red list assessments. And I'm sure once the new assessments come in, so it would give you a completely different picture on the levels of threat in the Eastern Himalaya, which would certainly qualify that area for a lot of funding mechanisms and support. So yes, definitely, I think Eastern Himalaya is definitely a region, and as Mike said, it doesn't really mean that we are excluding Eastern Himalaya from the sort of blueprint.
Brilliant, thank you. And Anthony Mazarol has asked, what role does sustainable breeding of aquarium fishes to create a sustainable future have in conservation efforts?
Well, I take that one. So I think it does definitely have a role, and I think it depends on the species and what the threats to it are. I think there are some species on the red list that have been assessed to be directly impacted by unsustainable aquarium trade. And I think for them, establishing captive breeding populations that can be then used to supply the ornamental or the home aquarium industry is definitely part of the solution. I also think Mike mentioned earlier about Project Piaba, and I mentioned it yesterday as well. There are some opportunities where sustainable wild harvest should be considered, provided that there is adequate monitoring of the wild populations to make sure that any of that wild harvest is not impacting the wild populations directly. So I think there needs to be a kind of matrix of different opportunities for different species, and it must be based on a whole range of factors, from the fish's life history to how it reproduces and also what the populations are in the wild. But I definitely think that there is a role to play for captive breeding.
Great, thank you, Brian. Mike, would you like to add anything, or Rajeev?
Not really, nothing much more to add from what Brian said.
Maxine Mo has asked another question, another excellent question. How did you narrow it down to 39 genera? Is it based on FEOW or IUCN?
That's for me. So yeah, so basically we have the completed assessments from the Western Ghats, and this is based on the sort of the information that we have from the assessment, which was overlaid on the sort of FEOW, Western Ghats ecoregion map. So it's a mix of both. So we've got both data sources that were used. So the red list data, complemented by the spatial FEOW data. So yeah, it's a mix.
Brilliant, thanks, Rajeev. And Patricia Clark asks, she says, I work for a conservation trust in New Zealand doing freshwater education programs, water quality, fish species, and habitat monitoring. We have a few species in one of your priority genera, Galaxias, and also one of the species listed on the evolutionary distinct and globally endangered list, Neochana haleois, the Northland mudfish. Would there be a potential to partner with us? We currently do a lot of work identifying and restoring spawning habitats for Galaxias maculatus, and are planning on doing some work on the Northland mudfish soon.
I mean, the real simple answer is yes. and this is precisely what we're trying to do is link up and bring together all the conservation actions that are going on for any of the threatened fishes. And yeah, please contact us, Patricia. We'd be really keen to hear more about what you're doing. And I'm not sure how much support we can give to you in terms of it, but we certainly can help tell your story and link you up with anybody that needs to. And Galaxius, as you say, is one of our priority genera, and there's a very keen interest already in the last few weeks that we've had to do a real concentrated piece of work on Galaxius. So that's yeah, please contact us. It's great.
Finally, there's a couple of points. They're not really questions, but I think they're in reply to the conversation earlier about how the priority species were chosen and why potentially Northeast India was missed out. There's a couple of points here. Mr. Paul says Northeast India fishes do not have a conservation assessment. That's the problem. And Praveen Raj Jayasimhan says the Andaman Islands may also be considered as it possesses endemic freshwater fishes, and these occur in small seasonal streams and face threats from extreme climate events and alien fishes. So yeah, both good points. I don't know if anyone wants to make any comments on those points.
Yeah, I mean, the assessment is what I talked about, answering Rameshwari's question. So that's something that's ongoing. And we hope to have an updated Northeast Indian assessments by the end of 2024, where all of the 500 plus Northeast Indian fish would have an updated red list assessment. That's something, that would happen by the end of 2024. And yes, so I mean, every region of India is important. So Andamans being an island, the Andaman Nicobar islands, and with its proximity to the Sunda sort of hotspot. So even from a sort of biogeographic point of view, the island, the archipelago is important, and there are lots of very interesting fish that we find there which are endemic to the island. So being an island fauna, I'm sure it would require some sort of long-term conservation attention. So yes, so and basically it's a policy decision. So I think Mike, you would be the best person to answer. So when there would be the regions would be priority for SHOAL's future funding mechanisms and so on. So,
yeah, I just like to reiterate what I was saying before, that the prioritization we do under strategy number 7 is just one of our strategies, and it's just to help us understand where we certainly need to increase the capacity, and we certainly need to provide or search and focus funding and our efforts. But it's only one of those strategies, and anywhere there's priority fishes and threatened fishes, well, the initiative is really there to help action in those places too. And I've got a huge soft spot for the Andaman Islands, so I'll be very happy to support anything there in any way we can, or find partners that support projects there. But it's a message to basically anywhere there's any of these fishes that are on the list, and even fishes that are not on the list. But I would say that we're really focusing on the most threatened fishes, and that list will probably increase as more assessments are done and more data comes in. Unfortunately, there'll be probably more fish identified as threatened. But the message is really that we're looking for partners, whether they're strategic partners or whether they're local partners, to focus on any of the fishes on the priority list of 2,338 species.
Right, so thanks everybody for all your questions. We've got a few minutes now, just up to the top of the hour. If anybody else has any more questions, now's the chance to send them in. But in the meantime, we've got a few more questions here. Brian, maybe this is one you could take initially. Why is the blueprint so essential for freshwater species conservation?
Sure, Michael. Well, to me, it's essential because we have to start somewhere, and we have to have a plan. I think the vast number of species that we're talking about, and the large number that are threatened, and really on the brink of extinction, means that we have to prioritize. We have to prioritize those species that are most threatened. Those are the ones that are going to be lost in the space of just a few years. In my presentation, I mentioned there's a number of species that are classified as critically endangered and possibly already extinct. We really, really need to focus on those that are most in need if we're going to save them from extinction. So a blueprint allows us to do that. It allows us to prioritize. It's a detailed assessment. You can see all the work that's gone into SHOAL's assessment and drafting the blueprint and making the analysis of which species are a priority across a variety of different metrics. So this is why we need to have a strong tool in place that allows us to focus our efforts where it's most needed.
Brilliant, thank you. And Mike, will this initiative only focus on the priority countries?
No. So yeah, I think I've answered that question already in the sense that the priority countries are where we recognise that a lot of investment is required for those countries, and in particular, some of those countries are really have been totally neglected in terms of fish conservation. And if we want to get anywhere near the 1,000 fishes, that those countries are going to need to be part of any sort of global effort. So it's really trying to emphasize the places that we can, like I say, have the biggest bang for the buck. And sort of adding on to what Brian was just saying about the importance of the initiative, the basis of this initiative was the idea that freshwater fishes and freshwater species in general have been very thoroughly neglected and overlooked by the conservation movement pretty much since the conservation movement started. And for freshwater fishes and freshwater species to catch up anywhere near the attention and effort that other groups of biodiversity, such as mammals and birds and things like that, to catch up anywhere near the efforts that are going into those, we need to give a real leg up to freshwater fishes and really concentrate and work together as a coalition across the world to really to make a difference as fast as we can. And even getting to 1,000 fishes by 2035 is just beginning to approach the level of attention some of the other groups are getting, and so that's why the initiative is so. We consider the initiative so important. And another aspect of freshwater fishes conservation is that it's extraordinary in the sense that there's nothing quite like it in terms of the interaction between the species and people and development. So some conservation action you can do by drawing a line around a large area and protecting it, but fish have a very intimate relationship with people, and people are fishing and eating fish. People are keeping fish. Fish live in wetland habitats, which are so intricately linked with people. There's few other groups of species that have such an intimate relationship with people and the development of people. And Rajeev pointed that out really strongly when he was talking about the future issues with water scarcity and the issues that it's going to face for people, but also for fish. So it's really important that we make a big difference for fish for that reason too, because it's really at the forefront of conservation in terms of how we have to see conservation into the future. A bit deep for Tuesday morning, but is essentially it's very for us to make a difference as quick as we can and show the power of a shoal of different organisations working together will be an extraordinary achievement for conservation, I think.
Brilliant. Yeah, it might be a bit deep for a Tuesday morning, but fortunately it's Thursday morning in London, so we're okay.
Oh, yeah, that's the sort of week I've had.
And Thursday afternoon and evening in other places in the world. But thanks, Mike. This is a really good question. What is one thing that anyone or everyone can do in their daily lives to prevent the decline and loss of freshwater fishes? Brian, then maybe you could take that one.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Well, I think, in order to have solutions to the conservation crisis of freshwater fish, everybody's got to get involved. There's been a number of examples today presented of how important freshwater ecosystems are. The species in them are important to everybody, and freshwater, we all need it to survive. So I think certainly forming partnerships with SHOAL for those that are actively involved or wanting to support conservation and being part of this initiative is one way. But I think pretty much everybody and anybody can get involved just by simple choices they make in their everyday lives. When we go to the supermarket, we buy things, we buy cleaning products, and the labels on those products very clearly indicate where those products are a threat to freshwater ecosystems. If there's a large red X on the back of it, and you look at what that X means, it means that it's toxic to freshwater life. So making sure you're using your purchasing power to choose products that aren't going to pollute our freshwater ecosystems is probably a choice that people make every day, and it's something that they can do to make a difference.
Brilliant answer, thank you. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who are wondering what they can do on an individual level. That's really useful to hear. And finally, this is the final question, unless anybody fires in any more. And this is to everyone. What are the next most immediate steps?
Yes, I can answer. So there's three things that we're doing now that are critically important, I think, in terms of those strategies. The first one is what we're really, trying to engage as many partners as possible. That includes like mobilizing the Shoal Zoo and the Aquarium Alliance to really build that powerful base coming from those really important institutions, but also trying to find other strategic partners that can provide help with the funding, that can help with the capacity building, that can help network and find those strategic the local partners too. So we're going to be going on a very, very intensive exercise to try and find partners to be part of the initiative over the next year, and obviously all the way to 2035, but really intensively trying to find partners and trying to couple them with the fishes. So by looking at the list of the fishes, where are they? Are there organizations working on fish, or even are there organizations that could be working on fish? So many of the partners that we've brought on board in the last couple of years actually had nothing to do with freshwater fish conservation before, but when we spoke to them, they said, yeah, we can add that to our work, and we're really pleased to hear that somebody's taking an interest in those fish. And we're building up a stronger number of partners by doing that. But also, in the last few years, we've also created 2 local NGOs where there's been a gap, for instance, in terms of work, and helping set up those NGOs and get them moving and help build their capacity. And luckily, we have a partner with Synchronicity Earth who's really there about really, really strong in terms of supporting local organizations and building up their capacity to be really effective conservation agencies. So fundraising as well, obviously the key to this is trying to find those funds and help shift the funds towards those local partners and the capacity and the skills from the strategic partners to the local partners. And one very specific thing we're going to be doing is that protected area analysis. And so by the end of the next year, we will hopefully begin to map each of the species and understanding their present protection status, which is very loosely written in the red listing, but not perfect. And so we really need to sort of do that intensive mapping and understanding where those opportunities lie to increase protection or increase protective measures. I'm not talking necessarily about exclusion areas or anything like that, but basically ways of protecting those habitats with as little effort as possible. So I think that from a core team perspective, that's our priorities over the next year or two.
Brilliant. And Andy Watton has made a point, it's not so much a question, but it's a good point about some of the challenges that ex situ programs have, particularly in countries where the legislation on bringing animals into the country is very strict, such as in Australia. He says that the problem in Australia here is that to get any new species into the country, we need to apply through the government by submitting an application, answering 53 questions. The entire process can take years before having access to the new species. We cannot apply for genus, but individual species. Of the 265 I have submitted and processed, 23 were approved. I still have 73 applications currently being processed, all Melatonia species from West Papua and Papua. Tried to affiliate with ASAP last year, but with no success as yet. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that, but yeah, making a point on some of the challenges.
Yeah, I would comment on that, Michael. I think I share Andy's frustration. I mean, we have similar restrictions in Europe regarding transfer of fish. And I would just say, though, that those laws are in place and those controls are in place to try and protect native species. I think there's no shortage of examples where the ornamental fish industry has been the root cause of alien introductions into ecosystems that have gravely impacted the native fish fauna there. You go to some places, I've been to the Philippines, Hawaii, the freshwater ecosystems are filled with species that are not from there. So I'm not saying that it's fun to have to navigate through that permitting system, but it is in place for a very important reason, and it's to try and restrict the flow of non-native species and to try and prevent them from entering waterways and then impacting the native species that are found there. So frustrating though it is, I do think it's important.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brian. And finally, Craig Rennie asks, for your target species that are of fisheries importance and data limited, do you have any community-based catch assessment surveys being conducted by any of your partners? And Craig mentions that it's a cost-effective way to generate large amounts of data and better understand the impact of the fishery. It also helps generate data-driven management measures that the community are involved in developing.
Yeah, I can take that, Michael. So yeah, so we've done that quite successfully in the Western Ghats. We've completed close to 3 projects where we've sort of carried out a participatory stock assessment and population modeling of different species of marsh seal based on catch data from local communities. We're also engaged with the angling community, who provide us with important data, for example, length measurements that we sort of compile on an annual basis and then model for different population growth and different other demographic data sets. So yes, that's a successful sort of model that we have employed in the Western Ghats for data poor species. And that's also an ongoing process where we engage with tribal communities, giving them logbooks, asking them to record all of their catches. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we do get a large amount of data that would otherwise not be available. It's just impossible to go into all of these fishing locations, trying to source data on the fish caught or the length of different individuals caught. So yes, so that's a successful model that we have employed and still employing in the Western Ghats.
Brilliant, thank you, Rajeev. So unless any of the panelists would like to say anything else, or unless there are any more questions, I'll wrap up. It's worth mentioning that the blueprint is a living document, and SHOAL will be working, as Mike mentioned, on the data and monitoring the delivery of the plan. So we're always making adjustments. It's not a kind of fixed, firm strategy. It's a living, kind of breathing document and strategy that will have lots of monitoring and evaluation over the next few years. The webinar will be uploaded onto the website and YouTube later today. So if you know anyone who was keen to watch it but was unable to make it live, then please send them to the website and to the YouTube channel. And the last thing that needs to be said for now is thank you so much for joining us. It's been fantastic to be able to talk through the blueprint and hear from Brian and Rajeev as well. Thanks so much to our speakers, to Brian, to Rajeev, and to Mike. And I hope you stay engaged with freshwater fish conservation. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.